We got a live chat over here, and before the show, I have nothing to do but sit here and wait for Colin to count me in, and I just type in the live chat. Steven over here asking me, is that really Josh typing in the live chat? Of course it is. And then someone else said we could be getting catfished by management. Management, at last check, was at a vineyard in Nashville. Mima always said no one does vineyards better than Nashville. But still, of course we would be here in the trenches. Of course management would be... rubbing elbows with the kind of people they rub elbows at a vineyard on a Sunday afternoon. But we got a jam-packed show. We're high atop a partly stormy and partly sunny downtown Nashville, Tennessee. They tell me it's Sunday night, May 11th already, the year of our Lord 2025. I'm not a big rankings guy, but tonight we make an exception because one or about 7 of you challenged me to release post-spring rankings. And I said, what are those? And then I did some research, and apparently that's where you don't use a power rating. You just sort of list the teams in the way that a pollster would. Again, this is like Portuguese to me, but I'm going to try and do it tonight. Not a JP poll. No. We're going straight up old school rankings, not ratings, and I'm going to try it. It could end very poorly. It may be a one and done for us, but we're going to do that. Of course, I've seen the headlines about the potential 16-team college football playoff, multiple AQs per conference. Of course we've seen it. Yes, I'll share some thoughts with you about it. In fact, I think I may have 2 thoughts you won't expect from me, given where we are now. Bold prediction season continues. Those videos have been lighting it up, by the way. What Colin does is he takes the full show and he chops it up like a little salami into individual pieces, probably too vivid. And, man, those... I heard him, and those things have been doing great, so we're going to continue to just load the show with bold predictions. And sometimes this time of year, we have enough flexibility where some of you will ask me non-football related things, and I'll throw it into the back portion of the show. And there's something that's long overdue to be talked about on this program in particular, because I travel every week. We got 2 big trips this week coming up. And I don't really talk about pet peeves because I think it really gets cringy when people who are blessed to be able to do what they love to do for a living find things to complain about. So it's not a complaint segment tonight per se, but travel pet peeves. There are a couple of things that are usual go-tos that bother everyone, but there are a couple other things I just don't think we're calling out enough. And in the interest of holding transportation in this country to a high standard, I'm going to do it tonight. I'm not working for the federal department of anything, but I'm going to look out for us all tonight. They're watching us in Wetumpka, Alabama. They're watching us in State College, PA, Dayton, Ohio, San Marcos, Texas. I just mentioned, let's paper pop it. I just mentioned 2 big trips this week. The Pate State Speaker Series is on fire. We've had partners offer to just sponsor the Speaker Series. We haven't done it yet. Probably do it this time next year, but that's how well that's gone over. So we got 2 more trips this week. Looking forward to it. I will announce when I can announce, but you'll know pretty quickly. So, I was not good at any foreign language. I can't speak a foreign language. I hate it. Sometimes English seems secondary to me. And so, when someone asked me to release my post-spring rankings, I thought to myself, what is that? And Trey was one of them. And so you see on the screen here, and if you're listening on podcast, thank you. Subscribe while you're at it. I'm going to read you what Trey said. So the reason I'm warning you is I don't normally do rankings. I really couldn't care less about rankings. I do the power rating stuff. But that's for in the season, I guess. Trey hit us from Little Rock. He said, I'm seeing a lot of analysts putting out post-spring rankings. What say you? Or are you going to hide behind the JP poll? I don't even see a poll in here, Immunity. I don't see the JP poll anywhere. I can't hide behind something that doesn't exist. Trey, the JP poll is for much closer to the season. So you say a lot of people are putting out rankings. So since Trey said it, I went and looked. And it does turn out, Jesse and Colin, that a lot of people in our space are putting out rankings. Now, we like to pride ourselves as being leaders more so than followers. Most of the time, I have no clue what's even happening outside of these walls. But in the interest of keeping with the times, per se, I'm not going to do it fashion-wise, but in keeping with the times content-wise, Why not? Why not try this out? And if it goes poorly, oh well. It's the middle of May. Only our diehard P1 crowd is here this time of year anyway. So I'm going to give it to you right now. I'm going to go top 20 if that's okay. And I'm going to try and snap through these pretty quickly or else this could turn into a 45-minute segment. My number one team in the country coming out of spring, the Clemson Tigers. Quarterback returns. OC returns. DC returns. Dabo's back, so the head coach returns as well. I just feel like they've built towards 2025. I felt like last year you could feel that momentum sort of later in the year, South Carolina game notwithstanding. But the thing that I pay attention to with them, best wide receiver room I've seen them have in several years, and they've got NFL talent on every level of the defense. I'm really high on Clemson this year. And the reason I'm doing this, the reason I'm putting them number one is because I do not want to hear anyone in that program talk about how no one saw them coming and everyone doubted them. If they go on to do something of significance this year, I want to stand next to Dabo Swinney and I want to say, we were underdogs. He and I were underdogs because outside of me, no one else believed in him. I'm pretty sure a lot of other people are going to believe in him too. Second team, or I guess we would call that number two. The number two team, Texas. Really, really high on Texas. I was just out there last week. It's Steve Sarkisian's first wave. Like when you think of a coach taking over a program, you want him to win immediately, yes, and then especially year 2, year 3. But it's really when you get that fourth and beyond year, you start to have your waves hitting the beach, hitting the shore. The waves of guys that you recruited and they've known only your program. They didn't play for some other coach and you. And so they've been just raised in an environment that you cultivated, and that is Steve Sarkisian this year. And so while they're replacing a lot of talent, they portaled very well. They are lethal in talent acquisition there. I believe in Arch Manning. A lot of stuff's going to be said about him. I just believe he'll play at a high enough level. It's almost a boring headline. I believe he'll play at a high enough level for them to win, and I trust him. I implicitly trust them. And so I'm going to put them as high as number 2. I think they could win the national title this year. Number 3 team, who I'm told some people have number 1. I'm not mad at it. I got Penn State number 3 right now. They've just got all the usual elements of themselves. Penn State's the most mischaracterized program in the country. They have been for a while. Here's the reality. They have floated in the 4 to 10 range in terms of average quality of team any given year. Last year, probably a little bit higher than normal. But that's where they've been. What have they lacked? Well, they've lacked difference makers at wide receiver to get them over the hump in a few big games. And it seems to me they've taken as good a steps as they've taken in several years under James Franklin to address that. They did it via the portal. But if they've got that, I don't doubt them defensively. They just brought Jim Knowles in for good measure. I don't doubt their running game. I don't doubt them on the O-line. They've got a third-year starter at quarterback now. So there's a lot that I know I can depend on. The floor's pretty high with them. But if I'm going to put them up at number 3, you notice that's ahead of Ohio State. That's ahead of Oregon. Well, that means I think that they can win the Big Ten, which means I think they can get over the proverbial hump that they haven't gotten over. And you would be correct because I do believe that about them. Another team that I believe in strongly this year, I believe in Alabama. Got them all the way up at number 4. I think the personnel is just pretty dramatically upgraded from last year. Specifically, could have one of, if not the best wide receiver rooms in that conference, could have one of, if not the best defensive back rooms in that conference. But above and beyond that, I was sort of disappointed with them and Georgia both in how poorly they ran the ball relative to the standards of those teams and those programs usually. And I think with Ryan Grubb coming in as their offensive coordinator, more so than scheme change or, play design improvement or anything like that, I just think the collective attitude and identity of the offense will be much easier to figure out. They seem kind of schizophrenic week to week last year, and that doesn't fall on one person. Popular though it may be to suggest that, it doesn't just fall on one person, coach or player. So I'm really high on Alabama, and I think the returning production and the guys that could have gone to the portal or could have gone to the NFL and have come back, it's kind of a version of what Ohio State had happen last year. Everybody talked about it at the finish line for Ohio State, but really we were talking about it in summer when we went up there because that's what Ryan Day kept talking about. The outside world was all about the portal additions, and he said, look at the guys who just returned for us that have been here 3 or 4 years. If we win, that'll be the reason we win. They won. That was the reason they won. Number 5 team, LSU got him in the top 5, really high on LSU as well. It's Garrett Nussmeier in an ocean of uncertainty at the quarterback position in his conference. I've got certainty that LSU can win with their guy. I've got certainty he is surrounded by proper skill set. They just signed the #1 portal class in the country. And Blake Baker, defensively, year 2 with coordinator, plus the players that he has, and again, through the portal, that they didn't necessarily have last year, should be able to put together a quantumly improved overall unit on the field. Not to mention, I just think he's one of the best in the country at his job. There is a layer of unknown because of how dependent they were on the portal. I believe they effectively address their needs, above and beyond, address their needs to the point where I think they can really, really compete for playoff spot and beyond this year. Number 6. This is where I've got Notre Dame right now. Love the nucleus, love the identity of the program. So the quarterback position is going to get all the attention. Riley Leonard leaves, and typically in this sport, when you've got a departing quarterback and the guy who's going to take over for him, in this case C.J. Carr, hasn't really started, it's a big question mark. And yes, it is for Notre Dame as well. Here's the thing you need to remember, though. Sometimes questions get answered in the affirmative, so he could be really good. And also, as much as that may be a question mark, the ceiling is higher this year on the quarterback position than it has been the last couple of years there. So for everyone who wants to label it a question mark and it could be a bust, well, okay, but it could be a question mark and he ends up playing better than anyone Marcus Freeman's had there so far. I know he's going to have the ground game. I know that I trust them at Notre Dame to be able to backfill, even losing a coordinator and losing some talent defensively. So the ceiling, or the floor is pretty high for that team as well, and I think the ceiling still is. I've gotten to Oregon here. I've got Oregon at number 7, post-spring. There is a lot of unknown still here, but like I just said with the Notre Dame quarterback situation, you can apply that across the board for Oregon. Yeah, they just brought in some portal pieces on the offensive line, but they're really, really high ceiling types. Dante Moore hasn't been their guy at quarterback yet. But yet they signed a really highly rated kid out of high school this last cycle, and that kid watched Dante Moore in practice a couple of days and said, yeah, I'm out of here. So Dante Moore, extremely high ceiling as well. But if you just look at the overall totality of the roster there, the reason, even with question marks, you can't go much lower than this for Oregon is because the roster is just littered with blue chip talent, because that's what they've done up there. Recruiting, high school, portal. There are very few places where you look and say, there's a question mark on Oregon's roster or Oregon's depth chart, and there are no former 4- and 5-star kids in that position room. Doesn't mean they'll all pan out, but knowing that program developmentally, it's likely a bunch of them will. So I've got them there. Running back 1, excellent. Wide receiver 1, excellent. Ohio State, I'd put right behind them at number 8. Tons of questions here. But the raw talent and makeup of the personnel is such that even if there's a question mark at virtually every position, you can't go much lower than this. And this is kind of post-spring. You know, when you get into fall camp and you start getting more definitive reports on these guys, it's likely that even in a rankings format, you kind of start to elevate Ohio State. They may not, look, there's no maybe. They won't be a finished product or anywhere close to that in week 1. The team you see in week 1 against Texas will be a far cry from the team you see against Michigan at the end of the season. But you lose a quarterback, you lose OC and DC, and you lose so much talent to the NFL. It's very natural that you got questions. Doesn't matter how highly you recruit. Everyone's got questions like that. So I put Ohio State at number 8. Now, this is where we're going to get accused of trying to be sensationalists. I'm really not. It's just you need to understand, before Colin even shows you who this is, you need to understand how my mind works on this stuff. Even though I'm not power rating, even though we're ranking, I do not rank you merely on where you left off last year. I think about what I expect you to be this year at the start of the season, and that's where I rank you. So just psychologically think through this. Let's say historically you're a high-achieving program, but last year's team wasn't that great record-wise. You have the least incentive imaginable to keep doing what you were doing, right? Now, that doesn't mean the changes you make will work, but it does mean inevitably there will be a lot of changes. So some of the last logic that I buy into when it comes to highly regarded programs that put bad teams on the field the previous year is, oh, it'll just be more of the same. No, man, they turn over every rock. They adjust every knob and every lever. They leave no stone unturned. So I got two of them in a row. It actually just sort of happened this way. I got two of them in a row here that had poor records last year that I think will be top 10 caliber teams this year. Florida is one of them. I got Florida at number 9 because I said the other day, some of you thought I misspoke. I didn't. I think that they're one of the few teams in the country that has the potential, personnel-wise, to be a top 10, top 15 caliber on either side of the ball sort of team. Not a guarantee. It's just that there's a handful any given year that you say, hey, if everything pans out for them, that team could be top 10, top 15, both sides of the ball. Florida actually can be that. It's May, so it remains to be seen if they will. But if we're ranking on potential here, if I've got a healthy quarterback down there, Lagway could be one of the best in the country. I felt like generally the program's been trending towards this being a year that it needs to really pop. Defense is young, but I think that's a really, really high upside sort of side of the ball. And I trust them to be able to run the ball. Therefore, I trust them to be able to control games this year. I'm just really high on Florida. And another one probably I think is the most overlooked of the major conference teams heading into the summer is Oklahoma. Apparently I'm higher on Oklahoma than anybody is. I think it could be a top 10 team coming into the season. Not one of those wait and see sort of things because I believe in the quarterback OC addition that much. I believe in Mateer and Arbuckle and their addition to that team that much that I look around last year. Guys, if they were on that team last year, I would think they would have competed and contended. So I think I'm going to have another top 15, let's just call it a top 20 to be conservative, caliber defense. Man, if that offensive line is in decent shape, it's going to be a really tough team to beat. Now, several teams will have their shot because they play, I think, the toughest schedule in the country, but this isn't about that. This is just about the caliber team I think you'll field to start the season. So the top 10 there is Clemson, Texas, Penn State, Bama, LSU, Notre Dame, Oregon, Ohio State, Florida, Oklahoma. I would say, Jesse, again, I don't pay a whole lot of attention to what others have put out there. I would say Oklahoma's probably going to raise some eyebrows. I think Florida will raise some eyebrows because Georgia's not in there. So I think them being above Georgia, them being above, we'll see. I don't want to spoil it because we are going to go 10 through 20 here or 11 through 20. But I think those will raise some eyebrows. LSU's high for most people. I think Bama's a little higher. I doubt a lot of people have Clemson number 1. But that's okay. It's rankings. I would ask you guys, just quickly, if I were to have put out the actual order of finish last year as my preseason rankings in May, do you know how stupid it would have looked? In fact, any given year, look at the way the season pans out. If anyone would have put that order of teams any given year in December out on your screen in May, how crazy would it have looked? So inevitably, things aren't going to go pure chalk all year long. So that's why I don't think anything's crazy this time of year. Well, I don't think anything I'm putting out is crazy. It's a fair statement. Let's continue to move on. Okay, here we go. Number 11 through 20. I got Georgia at number 11. Georgia's got to be able to run the ball, at least much better than they did last year. Now, like I said with other teams, any proud program that struggled to do something they typically are able to do spends the entire winter and spring and summer figuring out how to do that thing. So that is one of the main things they've been focused on there. I don't doubt that. I know that. I know those folks. I've been around them this spring. I know that. Will they be able to, while also starting a new quarterback and trying to reestablish their identity defensively? There's a lot of baked in benefit of the doubt that G logo buys you, and that works with me as well. And if you get in fall camp and you start to hear good things about them, much like Ohio State, that's another team that I'll probably bump up the ladder a couple of rungs. But, you know, they went and got Josh McCray, a running back from Illinois. He's not there yet. I think he's finishing up class. If they are what they should be, run game-wise again, he'll be a big reason why. I'll tell you another one, Juan Gaston. who I don't even know is listed as a starting offensive lineman there. That's the kind of guy, though. I know you heard some good things about him in spring. If they are to maximize their potential running the ball, that's the kind of guy that probably listed with 2s or 3s right now needs to emerge for Georgia and body-wise needs to get himself in the proper shape. But if he's there, those are the kind of names you'll start to hear in fall camp if Georgia is to be what they're supposed to be running the ball. If they are, Georgia's once again a national title contender. But we're talking about post-spring right now. So there's still a lot of question about that. I would put Miami at 12. Miami took huge steps to fix what was an egregious issue for them last year defensively. So they cleaned out a lot of the staff. They brought in Heatherman from Minnesota. And I'm interested to see, kind of like Blake Baker at LSU last year, how much year one improvement will he have? If they're above average defensively, Carson Beck will be good enough to win games for you. Their skill set, their ground game, recruiting those offensive linemen for 3-4 years now. That's how long Mario's been there. I mean, that's what you should expect from them. They've got a ton of moves they've made. I think they got the number 3 portal class in the country right now. So I guarantee you they probably look at what were holes post-spring and think we filled those pretty admirably. The reason I put them down at 12 is because, well, if you did, okay, but that's a lot of portal movement. That's a lot of dependence on portal guys. So I don't know. And you're coming out of spring, and a lot of guys you just added, you didn't even go through spring with. So 12, I think, is fair from Miami because the skill's going to be down there to win every game you play. But it was last year, and they sucked defensively, just horribly. So that's a 10-win team that I still think underachieved because of how poor the defense was. How big's the defensive improvement year one? I got Arizona State pretty high, man. I got Arizona State at number 13. That's the number 2 team in the country in returning production. And every bit as important as that is, think about this. There's no staff turnover there. That's a team that won the Big 12 last year and was one of the big stories of college football in 2024. And you've got the Big 10 and the SEC looking at it. And you know good and well they want to poach as much as they can. And you know good and well they look at Arizona State saying, it's just a Big 12 team, so we would be able to poach as much as we can. Well, they tried, and they failed. And I think one day the full story may be told about how Kenny Dillingham and Arizona State was able to keep that staff together. Not my story to tell, but it's a good story, and it may go a long way in deciding that conference championship race this year. I'm going to talk about them a little bit later in the show, but that's a team that has potential above and beyond just competing in their conference. They're very talented, and they are very together as a program/team. It's going to be a really hard out this year again. Texas A&M, I would put at number 14. Could have the best rushing attack in the country. They got 3 tailbacks I think would start most places, maybe outside of like Penn State, places like that. But running back, offensive line, trust it. Marcel Reed, need him to take the next step as a passer. But I'll tell you the thing that I'm most excited to watch is Mike Elko just sort of trashed their defensive performance later in the season. And you give that guy an entire spring and summer's worth of focus on his specialty, which is defense. They'll never look like that defensively again as long as he's around there. I've got a lot of confidence in that. So I'm pretty high on A&M. I'd put them at number 14. I'd put Illinois at number 15. Illinois is a team that personnel-wise is not going to go man-for-man with Ohio State, even if all of Ohio State's starters are new. They're not going to go man-for-man with Oregon, even if Oregon's got a lot to replace. Outside of that, though, right now, because of their returning production level, which is number 3 in the country, and because of how much you can trust that team, I think 15 may be low, honestly. We may still need to bump Illinois a little higher than that. But outside of the teams above them, who are just there because they recruit at such an extremely higher level than Illinois, that's where I'm putting Illinois. That's a top 15 team to enter the season, and they've got a chance. They got Ohio State at home. They got USC at home. They got a chance to do some big things this year. I would say, I'm going to read 11 through 15 there, Georgia, Miami, Arizona State, Texas A&M, Illinois for the podcast crowd. So that's 11 through 15. The most egregious there, Georgia, we're going to be lower on Georgia to start the season. I know that. Arizona State, maybe we're a little higher on them. Illinois, probably about right. I don't know where in the world people have A&M. We continue, 16 through 20. I felt like this was a good, responsible place for Ole Miss. Very curious. I've got Ole Miss at number 16 exiting spring. Now, we could be very low on them or we could be a tick high on them. Austin Simmons at quarterback, they've got full confidence in. Side note, he also already graduated, for whatever that's worth to you. But they got 29 more transfers coming in there, which is not a bad thing. It's just a mystery. It's not a bad thing. They wouldn't have taken them if it was a bad thing. But since they're disproportionately building through the portal instead of building through high school, there's going to be a lot of intrigue and mystery around this team every year, which means if I'm tasked with ranking them, I'm going to rank them around here every year. And those defensive losses, I don't just blindly or even with somewhat limited vision depend on just backfilling and moving on as usual. I don't just count on that. If you get it, great. But there's a lot of guesswork right now with Ole Miss, and I'd put him at 16 because of that. I got one we're really high on here. I'm way higher on Georgia Tech than I think most of the country is. I'm going to have them top 20 right now. Number 17, as a matter of fact, to enter the season. Haynes King is a high-level competitor. He's back at quarterback, but I also respect the competitive character of that team. I've watched it the first couple of years under Brent Key. I watched him last year. I guarantee you if I did nothing more than change the outcome of the Georgia game, which was like 19 overtimes, so it was coin flip after coin flip, could have gone either way. If I changed that outcome, I guarantee you everyone would have Georgia Tech top 20 this year. But because they lost, and you are what your record says you are, a loss is a loss, blah, 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 no one really understands how good that team is, how good they could be. Like, I think they could win the ACC. So that's how high I am on them. They get Clemson at home pretty early. They get Georgia at home late. This is not about schedule projection. I really do think the caliber of team could be that good. Running game's going to be really good, but just look at how they play. Look at if you know anything about Brent Key, watch Georgia Tech play, and it's no mystery to you. Oh, it makes perfect sense. That's a Brent Key team. That's exactly what they should look like. I've got South Carolina at 18. Lenore Sellers can be a Heisman Trophy winner. So they can be that good at quarterback. The running back room's kind of up in the air because of eligibility. We're still trying to figure that out. The wide receiver room, okay, they didn't majorly upgrade it through the portal. So is it going to be good enough? Can you backfill the departing players you just lost to the NFL draft? Because South Carolina did really good in the draft. I'm going to probably be a touch lower on them at this point in the season, because it hasn't started, than I think most, but I've got South Carolina 18. I'd put Michigan at 19 right now. The quarterback picture, obviously, first and foremost, is still hazy. If it's Underwood, how good is he immediately? They go to Oklahoma week 2, so if it's him, we'll find out. Always love young quarterbacks having to face Brent Venables on the road. That's always a fun recipe. The roster's plenty strong enough. So if their quarterback play is B- or better, 19's too low. We just don't know what it's going to be yet. And I put Texas Tech at number 20. That's a roll of the dice. This is totally on potential. Vast majority of their starting 22, and really they're too deep, will be from the portal. It's a different approach. It's an aggressive approach. Anything could happen in any year in the Big 12. So that especially goes for a team that hit the portal as hard as Texas Tech did. So there you go. That's my post-spring top 20. That's how it feels, apparently, to rank teams. That's not the JP poll. If I had the JP poll and it saw me put Georgia at 11, the JP poll would fire me. In no world is Georgia outside the top 10. And I just picked them out of the group. But, yeah, there are going to be several discrepancies with what I just gave to you and what the JP poll says when it finally shows up and it's ready to be featured on the show. Academy Sports and Outdoors just brought that to you, and they're going to bring the rest of the show to you free of charge, which I always say in the show, and then there's a guy or two every week that pops in the comment section and says, what do you mean keeping the show free? No one's ever going to pay for this show. Cool, buddy. Cool. Delete. Cool, buddy. Thank you. But nevertheless, whether you'd pay for it or not, it's a moot point because Academy makes sure that this never goes behind a paywall. That would be terrible for us all. So we appreciate them. They're the presenting partner of the show. They have been for a while. And not to be overshadowed, your home for Jordan gear, Jordan, the one that played for the Bulls, not the one, I would say the one that went to North Carolina, but we got to be more specific than that these days, don't we? So if, on the off chance, you find yourself purchasing some Jordan gear from Academy and it cost you more than $50, spoiler alert, it will, just snap a picture of the receipt, tag me, tag Academy, Academy X Jordan. That's the hashtag you need to use. I'll get you a gift card. Really, I will. Just watch, test me on it. And producer Jesse will, because he's combing the socials for such things. But yeah, we try and get you as much money back as we can around here. So there you go. Let's move on. Yes, I did see what has many of you up in arms. Welcome to 5 years ago in my life. So the college football playoff's going to change very soon. We all know that. When is the college football playoff not changing, right? When's the sport not changing? But Ross Dellinger, among several others, put out a little headline a couple of days ago that had several people up in arms, and I didn't get the outrage only because I thought we already knew this was happening. However, there were some additions here. So Ross basically said, hey, there is growing Big Ten and SEC support for a 16-team playoff, most notably a playoff whose format includes automatic qualifier spots. Now, if you're listening to this show, this is like 2 years old. I've told you that this is coming. In fact, I told you 5 years ago this was coming, and everyone didn't want to believe me. But that's okay. It's not an I told you so segment. But Ross is saying he's basically getting you ready for news over the next couple of months. This isn't going to take forever. This will be decided in the next couple of months, that they're going to announce for 2026 and beyond a new format. It may be 14 teams. It looks more and more likely that it'll be 16 teams, which would mean 4 guaranteed spots for the SEC, 4 guaranteed spots for the Big Ten. That would be 2 for the ACC, 2 for the Big 12, 1 for the G5, 3 at-larges. Or if Notre Dame makes it, Notre Dame and 2 at-larges. So the first thing is anytime there's a headline about the playoff, my inbox fills up with, what do you think about this? What do you think about this? Or can you believe this? This is an outrage. Am I reading this wrong? No, you're not reading it wrong. Yes, they just expanded it to 12 and they're already working on expanding it to 14 or 16. Why does that surprise you? This was one of the easier things in the world to see coming. And the way I know that is because I can run back footage. I could have Colin right now hit the rewind button. We could go back to 2020 or 21 or 22 when the rumors were first making their way around about expanding from 4. And I told you then, we're not going to 6 or 8. They're going to go well past that. They're going to go to 12. And once they get to 12, spoiler alert, it won't stay there for long. How many times did we do that segment? Those of you who have watched for a long time know I did that segment back then. Did I have some inside source? Did I have Greg Sankey or Ross Pate, or at that time, who in the world would it have been? Kevin Warren. Whew, friend of the program, Kevin Warren. Yeah, I didn't have any source. I didn't need it. It was pretty easy to see. Still pretty easy to see. So it was the easier thing, I think, than any of the rest of this to see coming if you know who you're talking about. See, here was my big discrepancy with a large portion of you guys who wanted playoff expansion, and you knew I didn't want playoff expansion, and we would always butt heads. But remember, I used to tell you all the time, if you could guarantee me that the motivation of the people in charge of expanding the playoff was the same as yours, I'd kind of be okay with expanding the playoff. It's not my personal preference, but if I really knew that the people who were in charge of the playoff felt like you, and they really just wanted to enhance the product while respecting the competitive integrity of the game, the stuff that you and I care about, I'd be okay with it. That was never the case. So my stance was always rooted in knowing who was going to make the decision. And the people making the decision never cared about the competitive integrity of anything. I know this is going to come as a shock, but they just cared about money. It's so commonsensical, I often don't state that. But I think I may need to state that Like, it's going to be hot in the South in the summer, and the motivation for these people is really money. Some of the most obvious things we have to sometimes reaffirm to ourselves. So the big ruse that I think got a lot of people is they convinced enough of the public that expanding the playoff was in the best interest of, the overall college football experience, that public sentiment was overwhelmingly in favor of college football playoff expansion. And you just assumed, everyone wants the same thing who wants expansion. No, a lot of people wanted expansion, but some for very different reasons. You wanted it for your reasons. They wanted it because it was an ATM to them. It still is an ATM. It just has a college football playoff logo on the side of the machine, but make no mistake, it is an ATM. And if that ATM didn't exist, if the ability to rapidly increase profit off of re-engineering the sport didn't exist, a lot of people in charge of the sport wouldn't even be in the sport. They're not here because they love it. A lot of them aren't here because they love college athletics. I would go as far as to say some of you who are dipping your toe into this show, but you really love watching political commentary, it's no different than that. You got a few public servants who have their heart in the right place, and you got a lot of people who got themselves elected because they understand it's a cash cow. Doesn't really matter that your salary is $210,000 a year. You're going to get rich because you got elected. Well, likewise, you're going to make a ton of money if you're a stakeholder in college football, as you look out for the kids, of course. So here's what we have to do. We can't just sit there and have that every day. I hate where this is, but I can't sit there and dwell on it every day. That wouldn't be fun. It'd be a little depressing. So here's what I do. I still acknowledge it's the best sport in the world. Even with its flaws, still the best sport in the world. I believe that. I'm not lying to you. I wouldn't talk about it for a living if I felt any other way. I'd go cover whichever other sport I feel is the best in the world. But I'm college football 24/7, 365 because I love it. Grew up loving it. I'll always love it. You have to accept that we're here right now. And so here was my next point of debate that I've had all weekend. We just spent 5 minutes to bring it to this point. The next point of contention many of you have is, all right, if we're going to expand to 14 or 16, that's one thing. But how are the teams going to get decided? And there are two schools of thought out there. The way I figure it, best I can tell, most of you prefer that however big the playoff field is, 14 or 16 or whatever, you just think that the 16 best teams should be taken or the 14 best teams should be taken, and that should be your playoff field. Why should we ever have auto bids? Why should we ever have an automatic qualifier structure? Why should any conference know before the season starts how many teams they're going to get in? And up until about 6 months ago, I felt the same way as you. Throughout the entire history of all of this nonsense, it's expand to 6 or 10 or whatever, I've always thought, well, no matter how big you expand the playoff, shouldn't you try not to overthink the room? Shouldn't you just take however many teams is in the playoff, 1 through that number, 10, 1 through 10, 12, 1 through 12, 16, 1 through 16? Because I always thought automatic qualifiers were dumb. But that was back when we were talking about going from 4 to a bigger number, but still much smaller than 16. But because we have gotten to where we are now, 14 teams versus 16 teams, if that's the debate, I've inverted my thinking on all this. I'm not on the fence on it. I'm wholeheartedly for the AQ structure over just straight seeding structure. And the reason is the same reason that I've always argued anything I've argued about the playoff. Regular season mattering the most. Now, you don't have to be in the room with me right now. I know what your pushback is. Josh, that's insane. How could the regular season matter any more than if you just know you're going to take the top 16 teams? If you already know how many teams are going to get in from a certain conference, doesn't that render the regular season meaningless? Good question. No, it does not. It actually does the opposite. The devil is in the details. I once thought this, if I'm describing you right now, I thought the same thing. So I know the stance you have. I know all the reasons why you feel the way you feel. But here's what I want you to think about for a second. Now, if you don't share my values about this sport, then that's a different conversation. But I'm just going to ask you a question right quick before I give you my reasons why I feel the way I feel, which I know will surprise some of you. I want to ask you, just stop Pause for a second. What do you love about college football? Because I'm going to tell you what I love. It's the regular season. By 10 miles, I love the regular season. It's the only sport, I will grant you that, where I love the regular season more than I love the postseason. Every other sport, including college sports, I love the postseason more than the regular season. College football is one of one. There's nothing else out there, pro or college, where I love the regular season more than the postseason. But for several reasons, I love college football's regular season. I especially love conference races. Okay, so if we have this kind of structure where we go 16 teams, but the SEC knows they're getting 4 in, or the Big Ten knows they're getting 4, or the ACC and Big 12 know they're getting 2 apiece, you got to understand what that's part of. That's not the end of the format. They're making it that way for a reason. Those numbers are what they are for a reason. So take the Big Ten, for example. What's happening here is the Big Ten is looking at their conference races as recently as last year. They watched Oregon, go all the way through the season, number 1 seed, and then they play in Indianapolis. And a lot of people were asking, is it really in Oregon's best interest to even win this thing? You remember in the SEC last year, Lane Kiffin and Ole Miss, up until they stumbled against Florida, they were in the race. Like they were in the race to go to Atlanta. Lane Kiffin said what a lot of other people were thinking. And he said, does it even benefit us to go to Atlanta to go to the conference championship game? That's horrible for the sport. It just sucks. It's terrible for the sport. I'm not even blaming Kiffin. I would have felt the same way. So what do you do if you run the SEC or you run the Big Ten? Or for that matter, if I was the commissioner of college football, I would look and I would say, you better get your postseason system fixed. Because you're not about to sacrifice the integrity of these conference races, which I care about more than anything, simply because your playoff format's out of whack. So get your playoff format fixed. Well, they all felt that way. So they looked at it and they said, we're going to expand it. Now, that part I hate. But if we're going to accept that they're going to expand it, and we can't do anything about it, once you know it's getting expanded, how do you emphasize and crystallize the conference races being the focus instead of just the rankings and who's in and who's out and who's on the bubble? Well, the way you do it is to guarantee a certain amount of seats at the playoff table. The SEC knows they've got 4. The Big Ten knows they've got 4, just as examples. And then you hit go on the season. And the entire season's about the conference championship race. Instead of, well, Alabama just fell to LSU, but don't worry, they're still ranked 9th. Now, forget about that. Alabama just fell to LSU, so they've got the 4th best record in the SEC, so they've still got a shot at one of the top 2 seeds and therefore a bye into the playoff or one of the 2 play-in games, but it's about the conference race. It's going to be really convoluted. I would argue it's going to be really, really tough to explain this thing to anyone, which, again, was an inevitable byproduct of this. It used to just be, in the BCS days, take the top 2 at the end of the season. They play for a championship. That's it. We're going to take the remainder of our time and donate it to someone else. The speaker from Minnesota, I yield the balance of my time. It used to take half a breath to describe how the college football postseason works. And now it's like, we've been 10, 15 minutes in on this. But here's my thinking. A lot of people will disagree with this. The way they're probably going to structure this, I've got a preference on this, but the way they're probably going to structure this is if the SEC and Big Ten know they have 4 apiece, they stop caring so much about the playoff rankings for a second, and they just care about their conference standings. All the way through the finish line, they care about the conference standings. Now, the way I hope they do it is I hope they go to 16 teams because a 16-team format leaves no buys for anyone in the playoff itself. Everybody plays in round 1 and 2 and 3 and whatever. But I do want there to be buys. I just want them to be baked into the conference championship level instead of the playoff. So like my personal preference is 16 if they're going to go to that, because here's the way I hope it works. In the Big Ten or the SEC, I hope the top 2 teams who previously would have gone to play in a conference championship game, I hope their reward is not playing at all on conference championship weekend. Number 1 gets the crown. Congrats, you won the regular season. Number 2, you finished runner-up, but you guys go take our first 2 seats. You don't even have to play on this first Saturday in December. Number 3, you're going to play number 6. Number 4, you're going to play number 5. And the winners of those 2 games will get our final 2 chairs. That means the top 6 teams in each of those conferences are in, theoretically, play-in situations, or either they're in the playoff. But the point is, think about how intense those conference races are and how important the conference races are. I would much rather focus on that than the playoff holistically. I do know that many of you will disagree on that, but I do feel pretty strongly about that. But I do want you to just remember one thing. If you listen to all that and you said, no, forget about that, don't care. I see your point. I disagree with it. I still just want 1 through 16. What's so hard about that? What's wrong with that? Why should the SEC or the Big Ten be guaranteed that many spots? You can feel that way. I got no problem with it. But I want you to remember there's been another caveat to all of this conversation. It's not getting the headlines, but you need to pay attention to this language in any of these reports. Could be Thamel or Dellinger or Zenitz or whoever. When they put out these reports, every one of them mentions something about strength of schedule. Every one of them mentions something about changing the definition and how we define the strength of schedule metric. Let me translate that for you. The Big Ten and the SEC are tired of their 9-3 teams being compared to other 9-3 teams, or even 10-2 teams, because the SEC and the Big Ten are looking at it and saying, do you understand how radically more difficult it is to play in our leagues than any other league? And they're not wrong about that. Now, they're the reason it exists that way, because they went and swallowed up most of the bigger brands and created their mega conferences, which I didn't like. I wish we could go back in time. But again, if we hit start right now, they are right about that. And so what they're saying is, since we're in charge, really, 2026 and beyond, the only way we're going to agree to any of this is if you give us our AQ spots, first off, and secondly, you better learn. In fact, you're going to. There's no you better anything. There's not an ultimatum. You're going to change the way we define strength of schedule, because there's got to be room to calibrate for how much more difficult the strength of schedule is in the Big Ten, or especially the SEC, than the Big 12 or the ACC or a G5 conference. That's going to happen. And what I'm telling you that for is because if you recalibrate that and factor that into the equation, and you understand how deep the Big Ten and the SEC are now and moving forward, it may be that the ACC or the Big 12 are blessed to have 2 guaranteed spots at the table. Whether your logic and principles and values agree with it or not, I'm just trying to explain the way that that could work in the future is, instead of having 8 spots at the table guaranteed, you could have a playoff with like 11 or 12 SEC Big Ten teams in there. And honestly, they could look at it even then and say, you know, it's still not enough. We still need to go off and do our own thing, because the gulf between the quality of football we're playing and the quality of football everyone else is playing, blah, blah, blah. You know how that would go. So I had a quote written down. We did a segment on this 4 years ago. We might as well have put on the Karnak hat. I mean, we were so prophetic about it, and we nailed exactly where it was going to go. And I said the following in one of those videos: if we realize I'm right, it'll be too late. Well, here we are. What do we do about it? I don't know. Let's move along. I didn't skip anything, did I? No, I didn't. Okay, let's move along. Bold prediction season is back. Thankfully, bold prediction season is back. Bold predictions on this show are exclusively from you this time of year, and it's what you believe in so much that you would honestly bet some of your own money on this. Let's dive in tonight. We do have a lot of boldness here. First up, Florida State. This is R. Wilmer from Clinton Forge, Virginia, by the way. He says FSU goes 10-2. They make the ACC championship game. Okay, that alone is bold. But he continues. They also make the Final Four of the college football playoff. This one is a 9.75 on the boldness scale. If this hits, this will win a Chalice of Supremacy. First one we will have ever sent to Clinton Forge, Virginia. FSU went minus 11 wins from 23 to 24. They won 11 fewer games one year to the next. That's the second biggest drop-off of all time, aside from the Southern Miss disaster of a decade prior. They've got new coordinators down there. They've got massive roster churn. They're starting a quarterback that got benched by Boston College last year. They do, however, play 6 of the bottom 8 teams in the ACC odds board at FanDuel. So that's looking up for them. They're not going to turn it around that drastically. Florida State's not going to the Final Four this year. So that's a 9.75. I'm sorry. That's a 9.75. Although I do expect improvement. Next up, this is ridiculous. Jackson from Jackson, Tennessee, said the SEC will go undefeated in out-of-conference play in the regular season. Okay, that's a 10. LSU plays out of conference in week 1, and they can't win in week 1. We all know that. That's an established fact about the program. So this can't happen. That's kind of a joke, but they have struggled. And they do play Clemson on the road in week 1. So we've got Texas at Ohio State in week 1. We got Auburn at Baylor. We got LSU at Clemson. And if you overcome that, you still have, I mean, do you know Arizona State goes to Mississippi State this year? Do you know that? Do you know Tennessee plays Syracuse in Atlanta in week 1? Do you know Notre Dame goes to Arkansas? If the SEC drops any of these games, this is toast. So that's a 10. I need not say much more about that. Next up, this is harsh. Oh, Nick from Westminster, Colorado said Wisconsin goes 3-9. Well, their over-under win total is 5.5. I made this a 7. There's a lot of discrepancy in the office about how bold this was. They were 7-6 in year 1 under Fickell. They were 5-7 last year. They could be disastrous this year. I would expect them to win 6 or so. That's where I'd have them right now. The Tyler Van Dyke injury sort of derailed them last year, but this is a program that's just having to hit reset, man, for hiring-related reasons when Fickell first got there. They brought in Billy Edwards from Maryland, so he's the quarterback this year. High hopes and whatnot. 20%. I want you to think about this number. So the way we define strength of schedule around here is we do it this time of year, and then we look comparatively. So Wisconsin, we've got playing a pretty tough schedule. We've got them as playing a 20% tougher schedule than the average Big Ten team plays this year. So it's not an easy draw. They play at Alabama on top of their conference schedule, by the way. I've got this as a 7. Maybe that's unfair. Maybe it should be a 7.5. But yeah, 3-9 would be a disaster. It's not like overly bold, though. Their over-under win total is 5.5. And lastly, this is bold, too. This gets a 9.5. Leo from Princeton, New Jersey, he said Oklahoma State wins the Big 12. I just don't think so. I don't see it. It is the Big 12. Remember, there are no 10 boldness predictions in the Big 12 because anything's possible. So the boldest you can get is like 9.5. They got the second worst odds to win the conference. We've seen teams like that win it before. Arizona State, Baylor. Their last losing record was 0-5, and they bottomed out last year. They're 104th in returning production, but then again, if you're that bad, do you want those players back? They're 133rd last year in yards per game allowed defensively. They were 115th in turnover margin. If it improves a lot, they're still not going to win the conference. They go to Oregon in week 2, out of conference, by the way, so you'll see them pretty early. That's a 9.5 on the boldness scale. It would be a big story, though. What do we have here tonight in the old Zevia can? Creamy root beer. You know, root beer deserves credit. Root beer, Zevia Creamy Root Beer, was once in the position in my flavor power ratings that Oklahoma State was last year. They were near the bottom. Relatively speaking, still a solid drink, but I was just not that high on root beer. I have grown to love the creamy root beer. 0 sugar, of course. So I'm going to take, watch this, new record on the show tonight. Not 1, not 2. Could it be? Yes. 3 sips. So take that, live chat haters. We appreciate Zevia. Well, just my eternal friend here and co-host on the desk. More bold predictions. I've also got coming up, I've got some things to say about travel. I've actually got a lot of show left, so let's hop through this, Colin. Bold prediction season continues. What do you believe? What do you really believe? Let's take a look at this. We got a little SEC flavor here. Our friends in Baton Rouge, just the utter hatred and disdain for Alabama while being loyal to the conference on display. One of them said the SEC will have 5 teams in the playoff. None of those teams will be Alabama. I'm going to make this a 9 on the boldness scale. Probably should go higher, actually, because if they've got 5 in, Bama's got to be one of them. But they say no. So at FanDuel right now, the SEC has 10 of the top 21 teams in the odds board. So you would think, oh, that's not crazy at all. Yeah, but not all of them are going to be that level. They got to play each other. They got to knock each other out. So what you need here is you need separation. Like you need Texas and Georgia and Bama and Ole Miss and LSU to be really good, and they win all their close games, and then there's big separation. So they're all 9 wins or 10, 11, 12 wins. That's probably got to happen. And are the other conferences down? That's also got to happen. That's a 9. And I think if the SEC gets 5 in, that's a huge story. But if Bama's one of them, you still lost. So that may be harsher than a 9, maybe like a 9.25. I mean, there's like dust in here. It landed on my nose. Oh, we're good, Colin. No sneeze coming. Next up, this is a good one. Take note at home. If you're doing bold predictions, Thomas up in Hutchinson, Kansas, this is a solid bold prediction. I don't think it's going to happen, but it's solidly constructed here. He said Nebraska, Kansas State, and Georgia Tech will combine for at least 28 wins this year. All right, I made this a 9.5 on the boldness scale, but I respect it. So we need 28 wins total. Nebraska win total 7.5. Kansas State is 8.5. Georgia Tech is 7.5. So you add those 3 numbers up, it's 23.5. So we need all of them to overachieve. Here's my struggle. If all of them overachieve, and for the record, I am higher on all 3 of those than the market right now. But if all 3 of them overachieve and all of them go 9-3, this doesn't hit. And that's tough. So I mean, someone's got to pop a double-digit win season on us here, and the other 2 still need to win at least 9 games. I think this is a 9.5. However, all 3 of them return a quarterback. All 3 of them are top half of the country in returning production. All 3 of them have bottom half strength of schedules in their conference. It's a 9.5. It is not impossible. It's just improbable. Next up, we're going to go 9+ here again. Eric from Warner Robins, Georgia, said last year's playoff chaos continues to disfavor the rested teams. Conference winners lose in the quarterfinals. So this happened last year. Remember, Oregon won the Big Ten. They got put out by Ohio State. Boise won the Mountain West. They got put out by Penn State. Arizona State won the Big 12, dumped by Texas. Actually, they didn't get dumped at all. It went to overtime. Still a great game, but they got beat. And Georgia won the SEC. Notre Dame exposed of them. You're saying that's going to happen again this year. I say that's pretty bold. I say that's a 9.25. And here's what's kind of crazy. So as of now, we've still got this backwards rule where only conference champs can be the top 4 seeds in the current playoff. So they're about to reconstruct the playoff. Now, we assume that rule is going to be dumped in the future iteration of the playoffs. But whatever format they decide on, it will be decided before this playoff happens. And the reason I point that out is if what you just predicted is true, it would be the hottest debate topic in sports because we would have 2 straight years of glaring examples that prove rest is detrimental to football teams in December. All the teams that get the byes keep losing. We're 8 for 8. What's happening here? Well, whatever the future playoff's going to be, it will be by that point. So you better get it right. And lastly, in the bold prediction department for tonight, Alex from Newberry, Florida. USC reaches 10 wins. Hello. And they make the playoff, behind Lincoln Riley's best defense as a head coach. Now, you may be thinking to yourself a few things, but one of them is, well, what has Lincoln Riley's best defense been? Did you know in 2020, Oklahoma, Lincoln Riley, they had the 28th best defense in the country? So what are we looking at here? We're looking at a 10-win USC team or better. They got to be like top 25 defensively, basically. It could happen. That's an 8.75 for me. That's not the craziest thing in the world. I do think they'll be it wouldn't surprise me if they were top 30-ish defensively this year. So they'll be flirting with that. If that happens, that's heavily correlated with their result. So if they're improved again that much defensively, maybe they win those close games this year, and they do get 10 wins. Could happen. Their win total is 7.5 right now, so you got to go significantly above that. I didn't think it was crazy. Some people in the office thought it was a lot bolder. I don't know. I'll tell you what is bold. Driving a lot and not visiting Quick Trip, not visiting our partners. I got tagged, I don't know how many times last night as I'm talking to you. It's May 11th. So May 10th last night, WWE had what used to be called a pay-per-view. Now I'm told it's called a premium live event. It was in St. Louis. Not important. What is important is Quick Trip had ad placement on the lower turnbuckle in all four corners. Look at that. We got the Kansas City Royals. We got WWE turnbuckles. And, of course, we've got our show. Anyway, so a lot of you hit me up and said, did you have anything to do with this? And I'm not going to deny it. I'm not confirming it because that wouldn't necessarily be ethical or true, but I'm not denying it. So even though I had nothing to do with it, I do want a little credit for it. But I do also want to tell you, it may not be the last major event that Quick Trip has placement as a part of this month even. Who knows? I'm not even talking about this show, but we do appreciate them. They fuel us every step of the way. We'll be on the road again this week. Here's a good question. Jesse, this was a question that we put as a graphic, right? Yeah, so Simon up in Portland, he said, in a year that seems wide open as of now, which teams have the most to prove in 2025? All right, so I thought LSU immediately when I saw this question. Brian Kelly's in year 4, and if you look at the records, they've won 10 wins, 9 wins, but it still feels like kind of a prove-it year for them because defensively you were so bad you sort of wasted away the Jaden Daniels year. And now we get to this year where you're 2 years into a new defensive staff, so you should see big improvement, and I expect it. And you've got Garrett Nussmeier, who is a proven returning quarterback in a conference full of question marks at quarterback, and you haven't made the playoff under Brian Kelly yet. They need to do that this year. So I would say LSU has something to prove. I'd say they've got the 5th best odds in the conference, but they're really tied with Ole Miss, so they're tied for 4th best odds in the conference. If that's the way the SEC shakes out, then LSU's, have they underachieved there? Probably, yeah. I got high standards for them this year. Miami's they still got something to prove. You know, Miami's gone from 5-7 to 7-5 to 10-2. Those are regular season records. That's what they've done under Mario. 5 wins to 7 wins to 10 wins. So that's progress, linear progress. You look at the roster, certainly there's progress. The players down there look way different than they did when he first got there. They haven't had their arrival moment, like on the big major scene. They almost had it last year. Defense wasn't good enough. It let them down. So they went and got Carson Beck out of the transfer portal. Carson Beck at his best is good enough to take Miami to the playoff if the other side of the ball fulfills its end of the bargain. And that's where you should be in year 4 under Mario Cristobal, who's a guy who's known for accumulating talent, which they've been doing. They ought to be a playoff contender this year, and they've still got that to prove. So I'd say them. I'd say Penn State. Now, Penn State's in a little different category here. Penn State perennially has been way up there. They've been the best of the very good. They have not been elite. So they don't have anything to prove in terms of, are they a high-caliber program? None of that. Yes, they're a top 10 program. So they're not trying to validate their existence like that, But the question around them has always been, is your ceiling just very good? And I've believed it is, as long as they don't upgrade at wide receiver. But then they went and upgraded at wide receiver. And they went and got one of, if not the best defensive coordinators in the country as well. But really, it's the pass catchers that have me excited. Penn State's been good enough defensively. They've been able to run the ball. They've got returning experience at quarterback. The program's been very solid. But if they're ever going to prove that that ceiling is above and beyond just very good, this is the year they've got to do that. They are very close to having the best odds to win the Big Ten. They're ahead of Oregon. They're right there behind Ohio State. I'd pick Penn State above Ohio State. If I had to handicap that conference today, I think Penn State goes to Columbus, and that probably has a lot to do with that. And if they played them again, it would be neutral site. But, I mean, if it's going to happen, I feel like that's got to happen this year for them. And Alabama also has a lot to prove. Different kind of dynamic there. DeBoer came in last year. Kalen DeBoer came in last year, and you could very much categorize 2024 as sort of it was what it was. Fell off towards the end, inexplicably ugly losses to Vanderbilt and then Oklahoma, I think was the big sledgehammer to the face. But if you go out and get the offensive coordinator that you originally wanted, and you just did that in Ryan Grubb, and you've got a guy in Ty Simpson who is a program guy. Nation doesn't know him yet, but he's a former blue-chip quarterback who's waited his turn. You, Kalen DeBoer, and this offensive staff should pride yourself on getting the absolute most possible out of those kinds of guys. If that is the dynamic there, they'll win with him at quarterback this year because they've got a loaded wide receiver room. They've got what they consider to be 4 returning offensive linemen. They should be able to run the ball better than they did last year. And that secondary could be the best one in the conference. So that above and beyond just having a lot of guys who came back, I think they got a lot to prove this year. I'd be really disappointed if Bama wasn't a prime contender for the conference title and a prime playoff team. Like, I'd be disappointed if they weren't that. They got the 3rd best odds to win the conference right now. We'll see how it goes. They're watching us in Beverly Hills, California, Greenwood, Mississippi, and Daytona Beach, Florida. Thank you, guys. Thank you so much. Let's see here. I'll tell you what we'll do. Yeah, let's go with the America's team thing right quick. And then I've just got to complain for a second to end the show. Dave from Oklahoma City, he said, you always call the Big 12 America's College Football Conference. That's true, Dave. He said, do you have a specific team that you would look at as America's college football team? Just use whatever criteria you want to. Yes, they're in the Big 12. It's Arizona State. I call the Big 12 America's College Football Conference because I think the characteristics of that conference most reflect the characteristics that college football fans love about the sport. It's very competitively balanced. There's not huge portal churn and coaching staff churn there. Every Saturday is like uniquely balanced to just be a season of its own. It's wonderful. Love the Big 12. High level, like entertaining, competitive product every week. Well, within that league, I think Arizona State would be my answer here. Number one, it's not an SEC or Big Ten team. You cannot be America's football team and be in one of those conferences because you gotta have a likable quality about you. And those conferences aren't likable right now. The Q ratings of those conferences are way down. So not only is it not a Power 2 team, it's not Clemson or Notre Dame or like Miami or one of the ACC or independents, but a powerhouse program. But the program was left for dead. I want to remind people, it's not all that long ago that Herm Edwards was the head coach there, and the program was going nowhere fast. And then you've got the sanctions and you've got the firings, and the program just spiraled into the desert. And if you looked at it at the time, you would have thought it's going to be a decade before we ever hear anything about Arizona State football again. And then they went and hired Kenny Dillingham. And that is a marriage that I always love to see when it's possible. Either hire a guy who played or coached at the school, if it makes sense, or hire a guy with ties to that region and to that program. Well, Kenny grew up in the shadow of the stadium. I mean, the guy would have crawled over broken glass. He'd probably take a 50% pay cut to stay there just because. So Kenny Dillingham is Arizona State, and think about the rest of the world around him. The rest of the world around him is full of guys that, whether they're at the G5 level or they're at the lower levels of the Power Four, what are you working your way towards? Winning where you are so you can get a bigger job. But that's not him. I promise, it's not him. And so, I celebrate that, whether anybody else wants to. I celebrate that. I would call it the Dilly effect, the Kenny Dillingham effect. If you could just spend a day around that place, and then I could take you around to all the other programs, you would say, I can't believe how different it feels at Arizona State. I can't believe how loose, but also how structured it feels. I don't know how to explain it. There's design behind that, but it's really loose. It's like a frat house half the time, but then it gets militaristic. As soon as someone blows a whistle or snaps their finger, it's like right in line, and it's disciplined, and it's regimented, and you go in there and watch them lift, and they're lifting hard, but then also you go in a team meeting, and they're shooting basketball over in the corner. It's the kind of place where if you saw it, you would say, I don't think there's any other place operating like this in the country. And you know why? Because it's the personality of the head coach, and it works. And I think every one of you would love it unless you happen to be a rival of that school. So I would put Arizona State up as America's college football conference. Absolutely no pressure whatsoever for them to live up to that billing this season. Right now, they've got really good odds to win the Big 12. You can find that at FanDuel. You can bet anything that you want over at FanDuel right now. They got a lot of college football futures in the market over there. They've got a lot of these things that we were talking about tonight. Like I told you, Wisconsin just randomly plays a 20% tougher schedule by our estimation, not FanDuel's, than the rest of the Big Ten. If you think that gives you somewhat of an edge information-wise, you can go bet the under over there right now. It's already down at 5.5. But if you think you got an angle, go hit them up right now. The point is, you don't have to wait for fall camp to open up. It's not 1938 anymore. You can go bet a lot of that stuff right now. Also, it's legal, unlike it was in 1938. All right, let's wrap up. I've got to check something here. Hold on just a second. It's closely related to what we're about to talk about. All right. So plane is on the ground. Landed on the ground, so in a good way. Someone asked me about travel pet peeves, and I just felt like today was the perfect day to talk about it. So college football talk is done for the show, so if you just came here strictly for football, it's time to turn the show off. One of you asked me about travel pet peeves. It is my opinion, it's my belief, my general stance, that I love what I do for a living. Travel is a huge part of it. We got to fly like 50 to 75 times a year, hotel room 70 plus nights per year. That's part of it, and I love it. But inevitably, if you travel that much, you experience a lot that the transportation industry has to offer you, both the good and the bad. So, first travel pet peeve is I really wish airlines would just be honest about delays. They're never fully honest about it. There's always, it says we're delayed until 6:38, but did you overhear what he said or what she's? Why do I need to overhear what people are saying? If there's a ground stoppage at Hartsfield because of low ceiling or heavy thunderstorms, and that's holding us here at our origin destination, just tell me that. I don't need to keep refreshing, because if I'm going to connect somewhere, every second counts. And if I need to rebook, or if I need to book a hotel for that night, or if I need to do this or that, or I just want to know because I paid $700 for the ticket, don't you at least owe me? I'm going to find out anyway. If it's reality, it's reality. If we're not going anywhere for 2 hours, we're not going anywhere for 2 hours. I just feel like I'm owed that. I don't think that's too much to ask. Just, they're adults. If anyone has purchased a ticket on an airplane, they are an adult. They can handle being told we're probably going to be on the ground another 40 minutes. They're not going to like it, but it frustrates people a whole lot more if they are lied to or the information is withheld from them. I'm dealing with this right now. I've got someone, it's Savannah State. She was flying home. So Atlanta's been a disaster all day. So she took off from Gulfport, Mississippi, as I've been monitoring her flight here dutifully. and she landed 38 minutes late, and now the flight to Nashville is delayed another hour. So anyway, point being, this news was known. This news was known. And another thing, while I'm on the subject of air travel, we got a big problem in this country regarding airline Wi-Fi, and specifically how easy it is to purchase and how tough it is to make it work. In my humble brain, if Wi-Fi is really, really bad on an airplane, then it should also be hard for me to purchase it, because am I not using the same connectivity to log into the portal and put my credit card information in and purchase it that I will then be using to surf the internet? But no, inevitably, I don't care what airline it is, you will never have connectivity issues when you're trying to pay for something. But once you pay for it, it's a total crapshoot. You may get the wheel of death for the remainder of your flight, or it may move along just like that, but it's anyone's guess. But I promise you, that payment portal, that thing will be working. Inexcusable. In fact, the speed of airline Wi-Fi in general, I've had a problem with, but I've voiced my concerns there. And also, and this is not an airline issue, this is just more an issue with humanity, we've got to wear headphones, guys. You've just got to. What planet are you from when you're on a metal tube with 170 other people on it, and you've got the audio on your laptop or your phone turned up full blast? You're just watching a movie. You're just listening to music. There is something called with itness. It is just a basic, like a minimum requirement of social awareness. And if you don't have it, you shouldn't be able to leave the house. And if you don't turn your volume down on your devices in public in general, but especially on a plane where no one can escape, you don't meet the minimum baseline requirement of with itness that is needed to operate in a functioning civil society. We got to be better. I was on a flight 2 weeks ago, and there's a girl behind us, and she's got the volume up full blast. It's a sold-out flight. So there are two other people on her row. And the flight attendants walk by twice, and they look at her. Now, normal adults are supposed to take that look to mean, what did she look at me like that for? Oh, they want me to turn my volume down. This was not one of those situations. So finally, the third pass-through, they say, you got to have headphones in or turn the volume down. You can't just be doing that. And she reacted to that, not out of anger, but more out of shock that it was even a policy. She's like, I had no idea. Do you need a policy for that? You need to be told that? So anyway, aside from the usuals, those are some of my pet peeves in travel. Love what I do for a living, but boy, you see a lot. When you fly as often as we do, you see a lot. Still, though, wouldn't change it for the world. Okay, we got to get out of here. Dinner is ready. For Director Colin, for Producer Jesse, I'm Josh Pate. Next show is Thursday night. Until then, take care and God bless.